Welcome to Bookish Minds, Season 07, Episode 09. In this compelling episode, we journey into Chapter 9 of Ben Horowitz's insightful book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. We're going to uncover the deeply personal reflections that led to the creation of a truly groundbreaking venture capital firm. And this isn't just about, business mechanics. This deep dive explores the profound personal journey, the insights that really birthed Andreessen Horowitz, and its unique philosophy, too, which dramatically challenged, the conventional wisdom in venture capital.
Exactly. And our mission today really is to understand how personal struggles, those hard things, and a genuine desire to actually help founders, how that can fundamentally transform an entire industry. We'll trace the lineage, you could say, of this revolutionary approach, starting from a moment of profound, deep doubt that ultimately spark a completely new way of thinking.
Okay, so let's unpack that pivotal moment. After selling Opsware, Ben Horowitz spent about a year at HP, running a big chunk of their software business. Then, boom, he finds himself at a crossroads. What's next? Start another company, be a CEO somewhere else, maybe just retire, or something completely different.
And what's really fascinating here is how this period of reflection, it wasn't just about his future plans, it was a deep dive into his past experiences. He started asking himself some tough questions, like how would he have navigated all those intense challenges if he hadn't had mentors? Like Bill Campbell, he wondered why entrepreneurship felt like such a black art, this mysterious craft. And if so many founders face the same problems he did, why wasn't anyone writing this stuff down? The common solutions, the insights, and maybe most critically, he looked around and saw that so few startup advisors, so few VCs had actually been founders, had actually run companies themselves. This whole introspection, it really highlighted a fundamental problem he felt, compelled to solve.
Right. And then the spark hits him. He sends an instant message to Mark Andreessen. Super simple. We ought to start a venture capital firm. Our motto for general partners would be some experience required, meaning actual experience founding and running companies is required to advise people doing the same thing. Mark's reply, almost immediate and maybe a bit surprising. I was thinking the same thing.
Wow. Sounds like perfect timing, perfect alignment.
Definitely. But to really grasp the driving force behind Andreessen Horowitz, we need to rewind a bit. Go back to a deeply personal moment from Horowitz's past. This is 1999. Right after LoudCloud's first funding round, he talks about how excited he was as the founding CEO visiting their new VC firm to meet the whole team, talk about the partnership.
And then what happens next is just jarring. A senior partner there, David Byrne, asks him point blank, right in front of his co-founders, when are you going to get a real CEO?
Oof. Imagine hearing that.
Right? As a first-time founder,
Yeah.
Devastating.
Horowitz said it just knocked the wind out of me. He felt like a total fake CEO. And when he pushed Byrne and asked him what he meant, Byrne actually doubled down, defined a real CEO as someone who, designed large organizations, knew all the senior execs, brought pre-built customer lists.
Yeah.
Basically, someone who just knew what they were doing.
And that triggered this huge inner turmoil for Horowitz. He says he could barely breathe. It wasn't just being undermined publicly, which is bad enough. It was that gut-wrenching feeling that on some level, maybe Bernie had a point. He knew he didn't have those specific skills yet. He hadn't done those things, didn't know those people. And the clock just started ticking in his head. It tortured him for months, he says. Could he learn fast enough, build his network fast enough? Or would he lose his own company?
But despite that huge cloud of doubt, he stuck with it. He worked incredibly hard, got help from friends, mentors like Bill Campbell, really pushed himself to become the CEO everyone expected him to be. And, through sheer effort, Opsware eventually became really successful, really valuable.
But that interaction with David Byrne, it left a permanent mark. Horowitz said not a single day went by when he didn't think about it. Always wondering how much time he had, how he could get the help he needed to build skills, make connections. This intensely personal experience, it fueled this crucial paradox that he and Mark talked about a lot. Why did founders always have to prove beyond any doubt that they could run their own companies? Why did investors just assume they would and then, help them get there? That conversation really rooted in that painful memory that became the ultimate, the lasting inspiration for Andreessen Horowitz.
Okay, so armed with this really profound personal experience, they start digging into the venture capital industry itself. And what they find is, pretty stark. Historically, almost all the significant returns were concentrated in this tiny, consistent group of firms, something like only 6 firms out of over 800 at the time, just 6.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking when you hear the number. And stepping back, the core reason for that concentration was pretty clear. The best entrepreneurs, the ones building the potentially huge companies, they only wanted to work with the absolute best VC firms. And because VC firms were, well, notoriously secretive back then, almost operating in stealth mode, they basically competed just on their investing track records.
Ah, so it creates this vicious cycle, right?
Exactly. Makes it nearly impossible for a new firm with zero track record to break into that elite top tier. So the big question becomes, how do you possibly disrupt a system that's built on decades of established reputation like that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they realized, okay, they needed to fundamentally change the rules by which entrepreneurs evaluated VCs. And crucially, the timing was finally right. Think back to the mid-90s when Mark and Ben were first entrepreneurs. There wasn't really an entrepreneurial community back then. People were just heads down building their own things.
Right, very siloed.
But by the late 2000s, that had changed. Entrepreneurs were socializing, connecting online, sharing information, comparing notes. This shift meant that if A16Z had a genuinely better offering, word of mouth, that powerful force, could finally work in an industry where it basically hadn't before.
Yeah, that social shift was key. It let them pursue these two core ideas that really shaped their approach. They didn't just want to be better, they wanted to be fundamentally different. So, idea number one, they firmly believe that technical founders are usually the best people to run technology companies, period. They looked at the greats, right? Hewlett-Packard, Intel, Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, all thriving under founders or innovators.
Makes sense.
Idea number two, and this was just as crucial, they recognized how incredibly hard it was for those technical founders to learn how to be a CEO while they were also trying to build the company from scratch. Horowitz's own struggle was exhibit A for this, and they looked at most existing VCs and thought, these firms seem better designed to replace the founder than to actually help them grow and succeed.
Okay, so the vision starts to crystallize. Create a firm specifically designed to help technical founders run their own companies. And the thinking was, this unique focus could build a brand, a reputation that might just vault them into that top tier, even without an initial track record. They boiled down the challenge to two key deficits a typical founder CEO had compared to a professional CEO hire. First, the actual CEO skill set, managing executives, org design, running sales, all that stuff.
Right, the how-to of being a CEO.
And second, the CEO network. Professional CEOs knew tons of executives, potential customers, press, investors, technical founders. They usually knew engineers and, well, how to code.
Big gaps to fill.
Huge. So how would Andreessen Horowitz actually help founder CEOs close these gaps? They tackled the skill set issue first. Horowitz kind of admitted, look, the frustrating truth is the only real way to learn how to be a CEO is to be a CEO. It's like you can't teach someone to be an NFL quarterback just in a classroom. Right?
Yeah.
You need the on-field experience.
Exactly. So their pragmatic solution for skills wasn't a textbook, it was mentorship. The kind of mentorship that could dramatically accelerate that learning curve. This meant all Andreessen Horowitz general partners needed to be effective mentors. And ideally, they'd be former founders or CEOs themselves, drawing from their own battle scars. The singular focus, helping founders become truly outstanding CEOs. And look, for those rare cases where bringing in a professional CEO really was the right move, they'd help find that person and, crucially, help integrate them successfully, making sure it was a strong partnership with the founders. The whole idea for them seemed so simple, so obvious, really. It just had to work.
Okay, skills addressed through mentorship. Next up, the network deficit. And their inspiration here came from a pretty unexpected place. Michael Ovitz, Horowitz's friend and an Opsware board member. Ovitz, 34 years earlier, had founded Creative Artists Agency, CAA, the Hollywood talent powerhouse.
Right. And to really get Ovitz's breakthrough, you need to understand the old talent agency model. Before CAA, firms were basically just collections of loosely affiliated agents. Each agent worked mostly alone, tapping into their own little black book, their own individual network.
So kind of inefficient.
Very. Ovitz's revolutionary idea was creating an integrated network. Any agent at CAA could plug their client into this firm-wide grid of opportunities, movies, TV, books, international deals. It made the firm exponentially more powerful. He called this concept the franchise. It included specialists in different areas, book publishing, international music, and it worked spectacularly. Within 15 years, CAA represented something like 90% of top Hollywood talent. They totally rewrote the rules of that industry.
So Andreessen Horowitz looked at that and decided to, and this is a direct quote, copy CAA's operating model nearly exactly.
Mm.
They even use the same job titles like partner for their specialists. Now, apparently they got some skepticism, people saying, come on, this is Silicon Valley, not Hollywood. You guys don't get the business.
Yeah, I can imagine the eye rolling.
But they pushed forward anyway. And they had Ovitz's enthusiastic endorsement, which probably helped. It sounds, I don't know, almost too simple, maybe even crazy, to just copy Hollywood like that.
But it fundamentally reshaped how they built the firm. A16Z meticulously decided to build out these specific integrated networks for all their portfolio companies, mirroring that franchise model. So they built a network for connecting with large companies for potential sales, partnerships, a robust executive network for hiring key people as companies scaled, an engineering network absolutely critical in tech, a press analyst network. They had this saying, show it, sell it, hide it, keep it, meaning you got to get your story out there.
Makes sense.
And of course, providing access to later stage investors and potential acquirers. That was a core service from day one.
Okay, so the firm's designed, the networks are planned.
Yeah.
But then they hit another unique challenge. How do you actually tell entrepreneurs about this different approach? Because apparently no major VC firm did any real marketing back then.
None. Zero.
They struggled to figure out why, until Mark Andreessen unearthed this fascinating historical reason. Turns out, the original VC firms, way back in the late 1940s, early 50s, they were modeled after old-school investment banks, like J.P. Morgan, Rothschild.
Ah, the really old money.
Exactly. And those banks didn't do PR for a very specific kind of dark reason. They often funded wars, sometimes both sides of the same war.
Wow. Okay, yeah, publicity definitely not a good idea in that case.
Right. So A16Z saw this history and thought, okay, here's another chance to counter-program. They'll do the exact opposite.
Yeah, this fascinating insight combined with their gut instinct to just, counter-program whatever the big guys were doing, led them to launch Andreessen Horowitz with great fanfare, as Horowitz puts it. And as a brand new firm with no track record, they very wisely leveraged Mark Andreessen's established name and brand recognition. The firm also quickly got this nickname, A16Z, which is, tech shorthand from old programming days, meaning A followed by 16 letters, then Z, kind of signaled their commitment to the engineering community. And to really generate media buzz and defy that whole no PR tradition in VC, they hired the Outcast Marketing Agency, which was led by Margit Wenmakers. Horowitz calls her the Babe Ruth of PR. Basically an absolute powerhouse.
High praise.
Totally. And she delivered. Landed them a Fortune magazine cover story in 2009 featuring Mark posing as Uncle Sam, no less. Andreas Horowitz became this overnight sensation, even though at that point, Mark and Ben were still the only two people actually in the firm.
That's incredible. And Horowitz mentioned something interesting here, too. He said that after 8 long years running Loud Cloud and Opsware, learning so many hard lessons, building the actual A16Z team was, ironically, kind of easy for him. He really understood the importance of hiring for specific strengths, not just looking for a lack of weaknesses. And he knew what fit really meant. He needed people who were great at the specific things the firm needed, people who genuinely wanted those particular jobs, and crucially, people who believed in the mission-making Silicon Valley, a better place for founders to build companies.
Yeah, and he brought in some heavy hitters right away. The very first hire was Scott Kupor, who'd been director of finance at Opsware. He became A16Z's chief operating officer. Horowitz said it was a perfect fit because Kupor loved running things, loved strategy, loved doing deals.
Sounds ideal.
Then they built out the rest of the franchise team with equally strong people. Mark Cranny, who ran sales at Opsware, came in to run the large company network. Shannon Callahan, former head of recruiting and HR, took on the engineering network. Margit Wenmakers herself eventually joined to run the marketing network. Jeff Stump, a top executive recruiter, handled the executive network. And Frank Chen, who'd been Horowitz's head of product management, led a centralized research group. Just a powerhouse team.
Wow. And the impact was pretty immediate, wasn't it?
Undeniable. Their whole theory about what a venture capital firm should offer, it just resonated powerfully with the best entrepreneurs out there. In just 4 short years, they went from being essentially nothing, nobodies in the VC world, to being one of the most respected top-tier venture capital firms globally. It really shows the power of having a clear vision that's rooted in, deeply personal experience and solving a real problem.
Okay, so that brings us to Horowitz's final lesson in the chapter.
Yeah.
He kind of jokes about this. He says he's considered a much better CEO now as a VC and writer than when he was actually doing the job. People call him a management guru these days.
Hmm.
But he points out when he was running Opsware, it was a very different story. His wife Felicia apparently used to say, they called you everything but a child of God.
Haha, wow, brutal.
So what really changed? Did he fundamentally change, or was it just perception?
Well, he's clearly learned a ton. Admits he was embarrassed by some of his early conduct as CEO, but by the end, he really was effective at running Opsware. I mean, they completely changed their business midstream as a public company, grew value from $29 million to $1.65 billion in 5 years. Lots of his Opsware employees even followed him to Andreessen Horowitz. So clearly, he did something right internally. Yet during those years, say 2003 to 2007, you'd struggle to find a single positive article about him. The press said the company was dead, shareholders wanted him out, public perception was overwhelmingly negative.
So the shift, he thinks, really came from two things. The successful sale to HP, which validated the outcome, and then the things he started writing after he stopped being a CEO. Once he wasn't the CEO anymore, he suddenly had this freedom he never had before. As a venture capitalist, he could say what he really thought. He could be vulnerable, talk about mistakes, without worrying constantly about showing weakness.
Right, because as CEO, you have to project that unrelenting confidence, right? For employees, executives, shareholders, there's no room for public doubt.
Exactly. But stepping into that different role as an investor and advisor, it changed everything for him.
And this raises a really interesting point about authenticity, doesn't it? How much your role shapes what you can reveal. At Andreessen Horowitz, he's not the CEO. They invest in companies that have CEOs, so that burden of unrelenting confidence now lies with those founders, not him. And this freedom allows him to openly share his own weaknesses, his fears, his shortcomings from his time as CEO. He can express controversial opinions without worrying about, say, offending a potential customer or partner. And it's precisely in those fears, those controversial opinions, he believes, that you find the clues to dealing with the truly hard things.
Yeah.
Because hard things are hard, because there are no easy answers, no recipes, because your emotions are screaming one thing while logic says another, because you feel like you don't know the answer and you can't ask for help without looking weak.
He talks about how isolated he felt initially as a CEO, genuinely thinking he was the only one struggling so much. Because whenever he talked to other CEOs, they always seemed to have it all figured out. Business was always fantastic. Their experience was always amazing.
Standard founder bravado, maybe?
Probably. He even worried that maybe his background, growing up in Berkeley with communist grandparents, just wasn't the right preparation for running a company. But then as he watched some of those peers' fantastic, amazing businesses quietly go bankrupt or sell for pennies on the dollar, he started to realize, okay, maybe I wasn't actually alone in my struggles after all.
And the ultimate insight for him, the really powerful takeaway, was realizing that in embracing the unusual parts of his own background, including the communist grandparents, and even applying a Karl Marx quote, "Life is struggle," which is apparently on his grandfather's tombstone, that became the key. That's what gave him unique perspectives, unique approaches to business. Those were the things he brought to the table that maybe nobody else did.
Like borrowing from a poet to motivate his team.
Exactly. Or understanding people beyond their corporate persona, which let him bring key folks together to save the company. Even bringing, as he puts it, what Karl Marx got right into the most capitalistic thing imaginable, building a tech company. This deep personal connection to the idea that life is struggle, that became the most important lesson in entrepreneurship for him. You have to embrace the struggle. It's part of it.
So now when he works with entrepreneurs, that's the main message he tries to convey. Embrace your weirdness, your background, your instinct. He tells them, look, if the keys to success aren't somewhere inside you, they just don't exist. He can relate deeply to what they're going through, the struggle, the fear, but he can't just give them the answers.
Right. He can only help them find those answers within themselves.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, through that process, they can find a kind of peace in the struggle, a peace that he himself really struggled to find when he was in their shoes. So when you boil it all down, what this deep dive really reveals is that A16Z's disruptive power, it didn't really come from some clever new financial model. It came from a kind of radical empathy, an empathy rooted in Ben Horowitz's own personal pain, turning what felt like weaknesses back then into their greatest strength as a firm.
Yeah, the core insight really seems to be this. Entrepreneurship, maybe any really hard endeavor, it isn't about trying to avoid struggle. It's about embracing your own weirdness, those unique, sometimes vulnerable parts of your background and experience. Those are actually your most powerful tools for finding authentic, maybe unconventional solutions.
Which leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener. What hard things are you facing right now, maybe in your own life, your career? And what seemingly unusual or unconventional part of your own experience, your own weirdness, might actually hold the key to navigating those challenges and maybe finding your own form of peace within that struggle.